out there in a different realm is the ability and necessity of having vision as a leader, and then being able to bring others into that vision toward what's next for your organization or for whatever you're doing. And I think that's a big differential between managing the day-to-day stuff and leading.
That's very good, and I appreciate that. There's really not a one concept definition for leadership. As a matter of fact, even textbooks that talk about leadership in two ways. They say it's a process, and they say it's an art form. And we're going to talk about those in the context of supervising, supporting, guiding, and disciplining volunteers. So, I talked about leadership at first because that's what working with volunteers is all about. Supervising, directing, making sure that the job is done to completion, starting at the beginning with the end in mind. Support, giving resources to volunteers, giving them training, giving them direction in the middle of the process, offering them advice and encouragement and thanks for what they do. Guiding volunteers. When we think of the word guiding, we're going to do some visual thesauruses this morning and a little bit of investigating and working together on defining what we're talking about here this morning. What do you think of when you think of the word guide, though? Anybody?
Influence, lead. It just
Give direction, show the way.
Right.
But it doesn't mean
doesn't mean
overpower them
right.
and drag them.
Right. That's good. Not dragging them, leading them. That's good. And then we're also going to talk about discipline. How many of us have had to discipline a volunteer? Raise your hand, please. Yeah, it's not a pleasant thing, but it is something that we need to do. Yes. You're going to drive for me? Excellent. Thank you so much. You're on. Okay, drive. First of all, let's talk about supervising volunteers. I don't remember where this quote came from. I've heard about it for 30 years. It may have come from a college class I had. It may have come from someone I worked with, a training book. Who knows? I don't remember where it came, but it stuck with me. When we're supervising volunteers, we're really giving them direction. We're telling them about the objectives that we're working toward. We obviously are going to tell them about the mission of our nonprofit or whatever it is that we're doing so that they can buy in to what's going on. And then providing follow-through, helping them follow through with the task that they have at hand, whatever that duty may be. So when we're evaluating the process of supervising volunteers, this is what comes to my mind. Ask your group what they have to work with. What talents and abilities and skills do they have? And what can each person bring to the table? That's more important than itemizing their shortcomings. Now, you need to know what their shortcomings are, right? You need to know where they're not skilled so that you don't put them in a place or give them a task or feed them into a duty that doesn't fit their skill set, right? Okay? Listen. All right. Has anyone ever seen visual thesaurus on the internet? This is visual thesaurus. If you go to Google and you Google thesaurus, one of the things that will come up is what's called visual thesaurus. So let's think about supervising for a minute from this perspective. There are 4 words that connect to the word supervise: oversee, manage, superintend, and monitor. Now, do any of those words fit what we're talking about when we're talking about supervising volunteers? And if so, what word fits best in your mind? What word strikes and resonates with you?
Oversee.
Oversee? Now, why oversee, Nancy?
Probably because I think it is not as harsh, not as strong as the other ones.
it's more ethereal. It's more looking over, 30,000 foot view versus the 10-foot view that it could be.
It's more guiding than dragging.
Right. More guiding than dragging, I like that. And ethereal, now that's an interesting word. Overseeing.
You're welcome. Glad I could throw it out there
appreciate
today.
A little vocabulary challenge this morning, that's good.
I'm feeling kind of ethereal today right now.
Good morning.
Big words out here.
So, there's two ways to think about supervising. Now, I'm going to use a Bible story because I think everyone will know this story. In Exodus, in the book of Exodus, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, right? Is everyone familiar with that story? If not, I'll explain it, but I don't think I need to. So Moses is leading these people, and he's trudging through the Sinai desert, and they start to complain. And God says, Moses, I want you to tell the Israelites to do this, right? So Moses says, okay, folks, we're going to go this direction. We're going to do this task that we've been given. And the Israelites say, no, we want to do something else. We want this golden calf, or we don't like this manna, or it's too dry out here, there's no water. And so they do different things that they're not directed to do. So they get off the path. And God instructs Moses to say, okay, folks, well, now we've come here. This is really not where we wanted to be, but now here's what we need to do next. Would you call that supervising? What would you call that? Can you give it a word? Does it fit into one of those 4 words?
This is Moses we're talking about.
This is
right?
Moses we're talking about. So Moses says, here's what we're going to do. You guys have done it wrong. But now that we're here, here's what we need to do next.
Manage.
Is that managing?
I mean, it's not, they've argued with, nobody can come to a consensus, so somebody has to take charge, so we're going to manage right now, so this is what we're going to do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Is there some monitoring going on in that
There is.
analogy? Where does the monitoring come in? What is the act of monitoring in that story?
I guess to monitor that they're going to do the new chore, the new.
He's gonna make sure all of them travel together and that, he's gonna make sure, he's gonna monitor that
Yeah.
we're gonna follow this path
Okay.
that he's laid out.
Let me use another analogy. If we are driving along in the car, who has GPS? And Siri.
Right here.
And
In
who's
my
got
phone.
the GPS that talks back to them? Okay, I don't have that, but I understand that what happens is that if you make a wrong turn, then the GPS talks to you and says something like redirect. And-
Rerouting, recalculating.
Yeah, and then it gives you new directions, right? So at what point, where's the monitoring going on in that situation?
As I'm driving.
As you're driving, very good. So in supervising, we have to monitor what's going on, right? In supervising, what would you say is overseeing? Somebody tell me what they think overseeing would be in the field of supervising.
They're doing what they're supposed to do.
They're doing what they're supposed to do.
They've got their assignment, we need to be sure that that assignment is being, that they're doing their assignment as designed for them to do.
Okay, Jennifer and Nancy, since Nancy likes this word, is this different than monitoring?
Well, they're close, but I'd probably have to say that monitor was stronger. It
Okay.
was more hands-on, oversee was more external,
Theory.
material.
So, okay, so let's ask this question. I'm going to ask this next question then. So in the story of when the Israelites are leaving Egypt, who's doing the monitoring and who's doing the overseeing?
I thought
Moses would be doing the monitoring and God's doing the overseeing.
Very good. Okay. So who's doing the managing and the superintendent? And where do they fit in?
I've never considered the word superintendent.
Okay, let's
in our-
say,
In our context, personally.
well,
So that one's kind of stumping me.
superintendent of schools is the person who,
Right.
leads schools, obviously, so, or leads the entire educational
Yeah.
program. Business,
So,
education-wise, facilities, everything, he's in charge, or she is in
Right.
charge of everything. Okay? So I'd say if you were to look at it from that point of view, these two words are very similar. Would you agree with that? Okay. So, in the story, who's doing the managing?
Something has to be Moses doing the managing, God doing the superintendent, because technically, we're looking at our organizations, and if we want the buy-in from the top down, that superintendent really needs to be almost like our executive director. Okay, yes, we may superintend or be in charge of our department, but we have somebody that is overseeing us to make sure that the mission of the program is being done.
Jennifer, you nailed it. This is exactly where I wanted to go with supervising. One of the most important things we do as volunteer administrators is get people to buy into our mission. You use the words buy-in. Well, not only do we want to buy in from the top down with our executive director and our board of directors, but we want the buy-in from the organic aspect as well. We want the buy-in from the bottom up. So the way to begin supervising at the very beginning of the process is to make that emotional connection with people, have them understand and feel that buy-in when they start the volunteering process, right? Now that buy-in may begin when they look at our website or when they have someone that has experienced the services of our organization. And we may not have any control over that buy-in. We may not have anything to do with it, but we can support that buy-in. We can increase the value of that buy-in in our volunteers' mind. And that's where managing begins. We know if they're motivated and we know what their motivations are in the beginning, then managing is easier for us because people then begin to self-manage. If they have the motivation and the buy-in, they begin to self-manage. Would you all agree with that? So that makes managing and superintending a lot easier. Monitoring and overseeing are things that we've got to do to track to make sure that the performance standards are being matched. Okay? And if the performance standards are not being matched, then we've got to come over here and do some managing and superintending to make sure that we get back on the path. Do you all agree with that? Next slide, please. Brenda, comments? Okay. Bruce Barton was a pioneer advertising executive on Madison Avenue, I think in the 30s, if I recall correctly. This is another person that I've studied. And Bruce says, the 5 steps in teaching an employee new skills are preparation, explanation, showing. Let me read this again. The 5 steps in teaching an employee new skills are preparation, explanation, showing, observation, and supervision. Bruce Barton was an incredibly creative person. And at the same time, most of us don't have left brain and right brain together. I know I don't. I don't have whichever brain is the most creative one. I tend to be a little more whatever side of the head that does the more analytical kind of thing. But Bruce was one of these people that was able to be creative and analytical at the same time. And in using those skills, he was able to motivate and influence people to do what he wanted. Not only the people that worked for him, but the people that he sold advertising to, and ultimately the people that were influenced by the advertising. And he used all these 5 tools. Teaching and employing new skills include preparation, which is getting ready for it, explanation, showing, observation, and supervision. So Moses told the Israelites where they were going to go. He prepared as best he could. They had to leave quickly, of course, but he prepared as best he could, told them to get ready. He pointed out to them where he was going to go. He explained how they were going to get there. He observed their progress, and he supervised when it was necessary. Ms. Brenda, may we go to the next one? Let's talk about supporting. Now, Bear Bryant is one of my favorite coaches. Anybody not know Bear Bryant? Does everyone recognize the word Bear Bryant?
That's you.
Okay. If anything, this is one of his quotes. If anything goes bad, I did it. If anything goes semi-good, we all did it. And if anything goes really good, then you did it, or the team did it. That's all it takes to get people to win football games for you. Does anybody know how many football games Bear Bryant won as a coach for the state of Alabama?
800 and some odd.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. I
Yeah.
figured maybe one of you,
It's a
one of you, but he won a lot. And the record, I don't know if he still holds it, but it stood for a very long time. So, we've got a lot of words on visual thesaurus for the word for support. Some of these words you guys will recognize from a nonprofit background. Some of you will recognize these words from a for-profit background. So let's look at a couple of things. I'm not going to go over all these, obviously. First screen was much more easy to talk from. But support can be used in many, many different ways. And I like to look on Brenda's face right now, because she's just studying this and thinking, what is going on? So look at this for a second or two. Can everyone see it okay? Because this is a little more crowded. I realize some of the words run together down here. But if you could pick a word, I want to have all of you, all 6 or 7 of you pick a word. If you could pick a word on there that works best for you with support, what would it be?
Several.
Got to pick one.
I kind of like that.
Backing? Okay.
Mine's back up and endorse.
Endorse? Okay.
The word I'm looking for isn't there.
We'll go ahead and say the word.
Empower.
Empower. That's a good one.
I want to keep going.
Keep going. Where is that one? Oh, right up here. Okay, good, good. Scott, Jennifer, Brenda,
I'm driving that word influence.
influence?
I'm liking plump for.
Plum for.
Plum?
They spelled it wrong.
Oh.
This should be,
I like.
This
Yeah,
should
I'm
be-
stumped on that.
I'm pretty sure, I'm just really sure that should be P-L-U-M-B, not P-L-U-M-B. Now, I may be
You can
wrong.
plump for people.
I'm not acquainted with that term.
Maybe it's supposed to be
Plum.
in.
Okay, maybe that-
I like. See, pimp would be really great too. Because that's my word.
Well, I just want to substantiate.
Substantiate, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, when you think of the word supporting volunteers, you're going to do a number of things. First of all, you're going to have them keep going. Okay? You're going to influence them, right? Somebody said, Scott likes plump for it, so we'll use that one. Sustain, substantiate, hold up, tolerate. I kind of like that one. Now, it has a negative context, but think about it for a minute. We live in a very diversified society, and I'm all for that. Sometimes we have to tolerate folks who disagree with me. And that creates guiding and managing issues, doesn't it? You ever run into that? I have. I run into it at Clarehouse every once in a while. And you have to encourage those people who are hard to tolerate sometimes. So we're endorsing, we're informing, we're equipping, we're empowering. All those words are good for support. Brenda, may we go to the next screen? Now, Kobe Bryant is a basketball player that you all probably know, famous guy, well known, easy to recognize. Kobe's made some mistakes in his career. Would you agree with that? Maybe not necessarily, well, probably in his work career, but also in his personal life. So when we're at the point where the Israelites are off track, and Moses says, okay, guys, you did this wrong, and that's okay, we've made some progress, but we've just gone the wrong direction a little bit. So now we've got to get back on track, or when Siri or Garmin, what's the word? What do you have? GPS, but do you have a brand that you use?
My car.
Yeah. Well, the one in your car. When it says,
Built-in.
when it says redirecting,
OnStar.
OnStar, yes. Is that supporting you?
Yeah.
Does it say, oh, you jerk, you took a wrong turn back there at 244 and 169. You were supposed to go left, you went right. Now we're headed to Joplin.
I think sometimes it wants to because it keeps saying redirect.
That's why I did the dumb.
But the idea is that it's still putting you in the right direction. It's still supporting you. It's guiding you. It's leading you. It's giving you support. So Kobe's quote here is that my support group is there for me whether I score 0 or if I score 40. Now, do you know, I know you probably don't know, but do you know who he's talking about there in that quote? This was an interview. Came from an interview that was given not long after he made a few mistakes. And the question...
His family? You think that he's talking about his family?
He's talking about his mom and dad.
His mom and dad?
That was a direct quote. And it came from a paragraph where he was talking about his mom and dad. So, as support services director or as volunteer administrator, you ever feel like a mom or a dad or a parent? You have children sometimes that need a little bit of support. If they screwed up, they want to do the right thing, they've got the buy-in, they're all set, they just want to do the right thing and help and provide help for and support for your mission, but doggone it, they made a mistake. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to criticize them? You're going to berate them? You're going to support them, aren't you? Okay, very good. Guiding volunteers. I think guiding goes right back to leadership. Would you guys agree with that? Guiding and leadership are very closely related, maybe not exact, but very closely related.
The vision of leadership is you're out front, and guiding oftentimes feels like behind.
Yes. Maybe.
Okay. Or walking backward.
Isn't that what a tour guide does? When you're touring in a museum or an art gallery or wherever you may be, isn't the tour guide doing this? Aren't they? And this is when I give a tour of the house. This is what I do. I go, now this is a room where we have our spa, and we've got our big whirlpool tub in here and a shampoo bowl that our volunteers use to wash hair and give haircuts. And I'm pulling them with me and I'm leading them, but I'm giving them direction as I lead, right? Giving them information. That's what guiding, I think, is all about.
It's also planting the seeds, because when you're guiding, just what you just did right there. You're
Yes.
planting the seeds and giving them an idea of where they might want to volunteer within your program. So it's kind of like, as you're informally guiding them along, you're also observing what their reaction is to things and that kind of stuff, so that they're figuring out where they want to be plugged in, and you're also looking at where you think they would be good plugging in. So guiding is kind of like more than guides them in the directions that we think they're be best for the assignment that you want to do.
That's a great point. And your words made me think of something about Scott Gaffin and his mission at the, when your volunteers come in and they're escorting your patrons, guests, tell me the right word.
Patrons, yeah.
To their seats. What are they doing?
They are guiding.
They are guiding. What is the title for those volunteers that do that?
They are ushers.
Ushers. Isn't that interesting? Henry Ford has said a lot of my favorite quotes. Henry said, everyone knows Henry Ford, "My best friend is the one who brings out the best in me." And I think that's what a guide does. I think that's what a leader does. I think that's what a parent does. I think that's what a friend does, like Henry said. So, in guiding volunteers, we may not use that friend terminology, but we're doing the best we can to bring out the best in our volunteers, right? So let's look at the visual thesaurus again. You guys are going to get really tired of this when you get through, I guess, probably. But this is a little easier to read because there's not as many words that correlate. But look what we found here.
Lead.
Look what we found here. Look at this.
There's usher up there.
Ushers.
Yeah, usher. Interesting. Anything else? Any other words that stick out to your mind other than those that I've pointed out?
Instruction.
Yes.
And we can't guide until we have a plan.
Would a plan be something like this?
Guide with.
Or something like this? Anything else up there that sticks out? I like the word maneuver. And I tell you why I like that word. When an army is practicing, and they call out the troops at 3 o'clock in the morning and have them go stand at their posts and get ready to practice, they call that, or they in the old days when I was paying attention, they called it maneuvers. We're going to go out on maneuvers. I think they call it something else nowadays, probably some acronym. I don't know, but that's what they're doing. They're going out on maneuvers. When we're guiding people, when we're supporting and when we're supervising people, when we're preparing for a task, or when we're leading in that task, are we maneuvering people? Are we placing people in positions that match their skills? And then giving them organization, giving them instruction, and saying, go. Go maneuver. I like that word. You guys probably think I'm strange, but that's all right.
I've that before too.
Yeah, it's probably happens daily. Let's go on to the next screen. Okay, here's another one. Now, when you think of Mr. Ford, you think of somebody that was busy, acting, working, maneuvering, leading, inventing. But here's what I think made him a great leader. Is this quote right here. Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is why so few engage in it. Now, as a volunteer administrator, how much time in the day do you give yourself to just think? To just have a quiet moment and just ponder about your goals, your visions, your dreams, your volunteers, how they match to your mission. Are you on track? Do you guys take the time to do that?
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day. I would agree with that.
I think technically, because we think we take that time, we should take that time at the very beginning of the day, with our day starts, you know.
Before all hell breaks loose.
Well, yeah, or you get pulled away, you know, it's kind of like, I had a volunteer one time ask me, it was an intern that I had, and she goes, well, what are your plans for the day? And I said, well, what I have planned for the day and what I'm actually going to do probably are two different things. Because in your brain, in your mind, you may have that, that to-do list, you got to get this done and that, but you have to organize that. You have to think, where am I going to for that day? You have to direct yourself, because if not, then you're in limbo all day long.
Yeah. A lot of people plan their day in the morning, which is what I like to do. A lot of people plan their day the night before. They take a moment to reflect on what happened that day, and they go over their plans for the next day, and then they
Oh,
sleep
that's
better.
what you mean, not plan today, tonight. Gotcha.
That does happen, though. And sometimes your day gets planned for you. But we all have to spend, I believe, we all have to spend a few minutes, 5, 10, 15, whatever you're comfortable with, every day, just considering, taking a few moments, clearing your mind, and considering and thinking about how it's going to go. This is what made Henry a great leader, I think, because he took the time to think about where he was going, how his team fit together, what he wanted them to do, how he was going to support, lead, direct, guide, supervise, and then ultimately discipline when it was necessary. Let's go to the next. And how are we on time?
25,
Left.
sorry, 8:25.
It's 8:20. Okay, so I've got about 20. Disciplining is sometimes a challenging subject, but it all has to happen. A few minutes ago, we talked about the word tolerate. And I brought that up for a purpose, because sometimes we can tolerate up to a certain point, and sometimes we have to make changes. We have to redirect. So, Tommy Lasorda is a baseball coach, and I like Tommy. He's a person that I don't know personally, but I like the things he does and what he did for baseball and what he did for the Dodgers. Pressure is a word that is misused in our vocabulary. When you start thinking of pressure, it's because you've started thinking of failure. Now, when you think about disciplining an employee, do you think about failure? What's the attitude that we should have about discipline? I say employee, I mean volunteers. What's the attitude that we should have about discipline?
That should lead to success.
That it should lead to success. Zig Ziglar used to say that when you pull up to one of these traffic lights, he said it wouldn't, and everybody's heard this before, I know, but he said it wasn't a stoplight. When the light was red, it was a go light, because you could travel safely, more quickly, and more productively. And when the light turned green, you could put your foot on the gas and drive away. So we need to reframe our thinking about disciplining volunteers. All these things we've talked about so far has led up to this point. Let's have the next screen, please. Now think of the words that you see there in discipline, and tell me just real briefly what stands out. Just pick a word. Anybody?
Indiscipline?
Well, now, in visual thesaurus, how this works is when you see the dotted line and it's red, that means that is the antonym.
Okay,
Okay?
that makes sense.
I like grooming.
Yeah,
Mhm.
saying that just-
Grooming, that is a good word, isn't it?
The other one, there's some negative word, I mean, correct. That could be a positive, but that also could be a very negative. You know.
Depends on how you use it.
Yeah, it depends on, you know, and correction's the same thing, but I think grooming,
Grooming is a good one. Anybody else?
I like conditioning. I guess for what I do, I have to condition them for whatever happens.
Yeah. That's a psychological term, isn't it?
Mhm.
That term comes to us from a psychological background. And it comes from Pavlov's dog. The dog was conditioned to perform a behavior. That when the bell rang, before he ever got to whatever it was on the food tray, he would start to salivate. Now, that conditioning, most of us think of as a precursor, but I'll bet you think of it differently when you think of working with your ladies in the residence center. Can I ask you a question? Because this is a word I wanted to talk about. What do you think about when the word conditioning is used? Is it a precursor? Is it something that happens afterwards, or is it a process?
It's in process. It's always in process. Because of the behaviors that we deal with and working with women who, you know, are pre and post release from incarceration, you never know what you're going to encounter.
Right.
So I'm constantly conditioning them for what could and probably will happen.
Right. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because it all has to do with discipline. We know sometimes things are going to go wrong. We try to plan ahead for things that go wrong. Eisenhower knew that when he was preparing to invade on D-Day that the weather was terrible. So he prepared for that eventuality. When we're conditioning our volunteers, we're planning ahead, we're providing a process of discipline, and at the end, we do an evaluation. During the process, we guide, we support, we supervise, we redirect when necessary. And that's all a part of conditioning, so that when the next project comes up, guess what? It's easier to perform the next project. If you've done the disciplining well, or the conditioning well, you've prepared that volunteer to perform even better in the next project. Next screen, please.
Going back
Scott, go
just
ahead.
for a second, you
Yeah.
know, the problem with society nowadays, or whether discipline had any positive connotation to it back before, very few people, I would think, look at discipline from a positive perspective. It's normally an effect of something negative, or at least a perceived negative, and it's the slap on the wrist, or you're being disciplined for doing X, Y, Z, whether verbally or non-verbally, or active action or non-action. So, you know, would be I always say during when I train is a mindset shift, and you know that would be a big one in today's society.
Excellent
Is having it come
comment.
from a positive
Thanks.
side of things.
Thank you for saying that. It leads me right into the next two screens, which,
Well,
which
just
talk
look at
about
it.
disciplining styles. Now, this is Bobby Knight. This is a terrible picture, and I apologize, but in this frame, I couldn't get it to fit properly. In this frame, Bobby has a chair in his hand like this. Anybody know Bobby Knight? Does anybody not know who Bobby Knight is? Okay, in this frame, Bobby's got a chair in his hand, and he's getting ready to throw it. In this frame, Bobby's just released it. The chair's flying out across the basketball court, and there's Bobby's face. Bobby's famous for his temper, right? So here's Bobby's quote. People want national championship banners. His job is to provide national championship banners. That's part of his mission. People want to talk about Indiana being competitive. How do we get there? We don't get there with milk and cookies.
Did he try milk and cookies?
Well,
Well,
we
and
don't know that. That wasn't his style.
But I also think too, that first statement misses the concept of what, as a basketball coach, he's supposed to be doing for his players. He's supposed to be teaching and guiding and helping those players become mature adults, which doesn't necessarily mean throwing chairs across the basketball court. But what he said says people want national championship banners. So in his thing, there's no such thing as losing, but you have to lose sometimes before you can
Very good. Do you think Bobby understood that?
win. No.
I don't know. There's some quotes that he's got out
I
there.
mean, he may have, but I think he lost sight of it.
I-
Because again, the regents in the school put pressure on them to win, you know, but
Numbers game.
it's a numbers game. But I think back to the coach who just left the University of Tulsa, not Blankenship, but the one before. I heard him speak, and he talked about, he says, my job is to teach these young men to be good fathers, husbands, and leaders. And and so I think sometimes we lose sight of that because we get so wrapped up in what our management wants us to do, we lose sight of what our true job is, which is to motivate, create, fulfill the mission of the program, and make it a win-win for our volunteers.
Right. So this is just Bobby's style, though.
Yeah.
He had a temper. His default personality was to lose it when he thought it would motivate his team. So when he felt pressure, when we talked about pressure from the Bobby Lasorda quote a few minutes ago, when we feel pressure, it's because something's out of control or not going the way we want it to. So that's where pressure comes from. And when Bobby reacted to that pressure, this is the way he managed. This is the way he disciplined. Next screen, please. John Wooden was a different kind of basketball coach. This is not a very good picture of John, but there's all of his awards. Coach Wooden, I shouldn't call him John. I have a lot of respect for him. John talked about discipline in this way. He says a coach is someone who can give correction without resentment. I think what he meant by that he can give correction without resentment on either side, from himself or as a result, or in the player as a result of the discipline.
So when whomever you are guiding understands that our role is to help them be the best they can be, and they trust that, then the correction, the discipline, the whatever, redirection is accepted better.
Right.
And we have to trust then that we're doing it in the right way also. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me take a look at that next screen. Jack Welch was another great leader, is another great leader. As a matter of fact, he was a CEO of GE for many years, and he led them through some difficult times and some great times. But everybody recognized the name Jack Welch as a leader and CEO. Now, I'm not going to quote this yet. One of the things Jack said that in disciplining, I should have put this up there, I didn't think about it until just now, under discipline. But one of the things Jack Welch said about disciplining is his job as a leader of thousands and thousands of people is to find a way to teach the top 750 people to be just like him and to be good leaders. He said the best way to do that is, he compared it to using a garden analogy. The best way to do that is to fertilize, to make sure the soil's prepared, to make sure they've got the best seeds, meaning the best talent, so that the plants can grow properly. But once in a while, you have to do some weeding. So in disciplining, we've probably all had times when we had to terminate a volunteer, right? And that's not very fun. But our objective in disciplining a volunteer in that way is to help them understand that, gosh, we're sorry, this is not going to work. But we still want them to have a buy-in to our mission. You know, we don't want them to go out and talk to 10 people and say, God, that guy over, or that lady over at, and they're the worst volunteer administrator, and that whole nonprofit over there, just terrible people. We don't want them to leave saying that, right? We want to discipline them in a way where it's more like weeding, and a gentle kind of nurturing, where, you know what, we're sorry, this is just not going to work out. I'm sure you can find other places that you would be great as a volunteer, but it's just not going to work out here. However you want to say that, but that's another form of doing it. I've had one challenging experience, only one, thank goodness, since I've been a volunteer administrator. And that was when a young man came to volunteer at Clarehouse. And he was under the influence of something. And he was asked to leave. I said, you know what, I appreciate the fact that you've maybe got one tied on last night or whatever, but you're just not able to perform. I don't want you to hurt yourself out here in the gardens. Why don't you go ahead and just go on home and let me go ahead and do the exit interview now, and we'll just hope that you'll find a good volunteer place somewhere else. The next day he came back. He was just furious with me. But the problem was he was more inebriated the second day than he was the first day. I had no control over that. There was no way I was going to be able to discipline that person in the kind of nurturing way that I wanted to do it. Sometimes you're just stuck in that place, and we probably have all been there. So, oh, can we go back one? I'm sorry.
One further?
There we go. That's it, right. Putting it all together. Before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. And this came from that gardening analogy that he was using in this article. I have no idea if he ever grew a plant, but he talked about it. So now let's go to the next one. What is leadership? Now, this is the question we asked at the beginning of the presentation. Textbooks describe leadership as follows. Most definitions of leadership reflect the assumption that it involves a process whereby intentional influence is exerted over the other people to guide, structure, and facilitate activities and relationships in a group or organization. Still others define leadership as the art of influence. Now, this sentence came from an organizational leadership textbook. And you can tell, I think, that the author of the textbook was trying to be very scholarly up to right here. And then this is his opinion, or her, it was a guy that wrote it. And this is his opinion, right here. So look at that definition and tell me what you think about that.
I think you look at that last sentence, it really defines the way we as working with volunteers need to be. You know, we are, it is an influence, we are influencing them in the fact that you're getting them to buy in our mission, to accomplish our mission. That's why every one of us should have a volunteer mission, or a volunteer mission program, you know, statement.
Exactly.
You know.
That's a good point. Well, two words stick out in my mind here. The word process and the word art. And it makes me, when I was thinking about this, it made me think of creating a piece of art. I don't create art. I've got a granddaughter who lives with me. She's pretty sharp, but she's not sharp when it comes to reading, writing, and arithmetic. I really have to work with her when it comes to sticking to the books. But you say, McKaylee, draw me a picture of that flower. Wow. I mean, I said, draw me a picture of a rose and draw me a picture of a tulip. And I wish I had saved those pictures and brought them today. But one of them looked just like a rose and one of them just looked just like a tulip. And I couldn't. I've never tried to draw either one, and she did a great job. But what she did in the drawing of those two flowers was a process. And I think leadership is the same way. I think leadership is a process. We're creating art, and our art is influence. When we're influencing others, we are supervising, we're supporting, we're guiding, and we're disciplining when necessary. Would you guys agree with that? Okay.
And it is an art form,
Yeah.
It is an
I'm
art.
doing it.
But sometimes there's good art, sometimes there's bad art.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But all art is subjective, so
So
well,
when
you
we-
can't win.
Tomato, tomato, yes, that's right.
Great point. And so when we look at leadership styles like Tommy Lasorda, where he talks about dealing with pressure and making it a positive, or when we talk about Henry Ford and his idea of really taking the time to think about how you're going to lead, guide, direct, support, and discipline people. You got to think about it. Spend time considering and planning ahead. When we talk about people like Bear Bryant, you know, he was a winner, and he got it done. He followed through. He worked hard. When we talk about people like Bobby Knight was a leader. His leadership style was something that we don't all agree with, but he was a leader. And when we talk about my favorite, Coach John Wooden, we talk about somebody that was he was contemplative, he was motivational, he was thoughtful like Henry Ford. He planned his head, he planned his thoughts, he determined what he was going to say and think, and the best thing John Wooden did was to figure out what made people tick. And find a way to use that motivation that he could muster to get them to do what they needed to do that was best for them. So I think that's what supervising, supporting, guiding, and disciplining is all about. And I think we're at our last screen is the next one. Next one is the references. So thank you so much.
Great job.